are here with Swami Chidbrahmananda, aka Brother Vance, aka Monkotronic. He has a YouTube channel by the same name, right? Monkotronic, where he is teaching a Christian form of Eastern philosophy. I'm going to let him explain it. He will do that much better than I would. And he is teaching online, and he is giving retreats in person as well as perhaps online. I'm not sure. He will tell us that too. And I'm just very curious. We both came from the same organization, which is called the Ramakrishna Mission. In the West, it's called the Vedanta movement. We have both been monks in the same tradition. And he is now experimenting in Colorado, an alternative community where he is focusing on bringing the Vedic message of the East, but integrating that in our Western culture, in a Christian culture. Can you explain a little bit? Because when I asked you for a topic, and you told me Vedic Christianity is a topic that I would love to share. Can you a little bit start out by explaining what that means, and also why is this relevant for our Western culture?
Right.
The two very
yes,
big questions.
Exactly. It is a big question, but it's answerable. It's sort of where my mind has been swimming for the last couple of years. My whole idea or view of religion has radically changed, actually, over the course of the last. Well, I can't put a bookends on it. It's probably been my whole life that it's been leading toward this, but there's this notion inside that the earliest scriptures that we have available to us on the planet talk about the unity of religions, that all religions are one. And Ramakrishna makes some rather wonderful statements about that oneness of religion, and that all religions are true, that God can be realized in all of the different paths. Vivekananda, his primary student, was even more radical in the sense that he said, as many religions, or as many people, so many religions, so many paths. And I've done a lot of thinking about that, because the website for the center here in Colorado is called onespirit.center. And on there, I wrote this little blurb about, imagine religion in the days before Bibles, before Qurans, before Vedas, before anything, before any organizations, before teachers. Imagine being born into this world in those days. No technology. Life has a very human pace and a very human scale. And you want to know who you are. You look at the night sky and you wonder about it. You look at the mountains and you wonder about them. And you just experience life, and it is the impetus for your wonder and for your investigation. And one of the reasons that I chose to do this experiment in Colorado was because I went camping in the mountains about, 3 years ago with Greg, who is also a monk from the Ramakrishna order. And we went up in those mountains, and I was just brought to tears at least 3 or 4 times over that weekend because of the intensity of the beauty around me. And I thought to myself, this is my temple. This is the temple that the Divine Mother has built, and I want to live in this temple. And so that's why I chose Colorado. I wanted a temple that human hands and human ideas had not built. And I wanted to join the flow of religion that has happened since the days when there was nothing. And I wanted the same freedom of thought and the freedom of investigation and the inspiration of investigation to come very holistically, very much from the world and life that I'm living, to be engaged in it. And it's my belief, that the moment is God, that the Christian God, or in the Old Testament, he says, that's my name. I am is my name. And I thought, well, that I am, that's very important. I am is the moment. It's the present. It's the isness of being. And this moment contains all of God, and this moment contains all of the world's scriptures. And that for those who have the attention and the focus, they can distill those truths from the very air of this moment, from the very presence of this moment, that it's all available to the person with pure mind being an unselfish mind. And so my view of religion has been that we've made a terrible mistake because of the egoism that's inherent to our experience of being body-mind or thinking that we're body-mind. Because of that egoism, which boundaries us all off from each other and gives us a sense of safety and knowing in a world that is completely unknowable. And we've projected that onto religion, so that each time the Divine Mother came to us, you know, when she came as Rama, when she came as Krishna, when she came as Chaitanya, when she came as Buddha, when she came as Jesus, when she came each of these times, we created a puddle of religion around each one of those times that she came, and we fenced it off and we walled it off and we owned it as a culture to whom she came. We projected our own boundaries on it, our own requirements on it. And so now in the modern world, our view of Christianity is all of this collection of distinct puddles that kind of yell over the walls to each other in a sense of wanting to have an interfaith. And it occurred to me that's the falsification, that this is not a set of puddles, but this is a growing river that's ever deeper and wider. And the wisdom and insight that we have available to us grows each time that the divine manifests in a pure form like that. And that we are looking at not an interreligious or an interfaith relationship between different philosophies, but we're looking at a singular philosophy, a singular religion that is ever expanding and ever deepening for us, and that we have all of the world's scriptures to use and all of the ideals to look at, because all of them are an expression of a singularity, and that is of a divine love that has no boundary, no condition, no circumstance, no limit.
That's a beautiful idea, that there is one, you know, way of, and that everything, instead of even them being different paths, they're all part of the same path.
That's it. That's it. And that there are formed paths within that, but there's also the freedom just to take off across the meadow. You know, if you understand that this world is spiritual and the point of it is spiritual, the point of it is growing in your ideal, expanding in your ability to express your highest ideal, then you don't even need a path. You just need awareness. You just need a clear mind. You do have to be careful that you have done the yamas and the niyamas. You do have to do the self-disciplines. You know, you have to definitely get your mind to a still point, to a place where you can hold the silence there. Because without that silence, it's hard to hear your inner nature, your inner guru, the inner teacher, because the noise of ego is much louder and will cloud out that voice very quickly. And so you do have to take a lot of personal responsibility for the condition of your mind. You can't just go throwing a bunch of trash in there all the time and then expect that everything that you do is spiritual or true. You know, you have to stay very close to your inner guide, and that only happens in a very silent, very peaceful interior. Yeah, and you know, part of the journey is that also getting to a place where you can hear God in the wind, where you can read God in the presence. You know, and that comes in time, and it comes silently. It comes very sweetly, and it's not something that you own directly. It's something that you are directly.
You came from, like I did, from a very rather conservative and traditional sannyasi, I mean monk culture, which is kind of the opposite of everything you were saying, though philosophically very much aims to be there, being Vedanta, being Advaitic, acknowledging the diversity, yet understanding there's a singularity under this diversity. In a way, philosophically very tolerant, but when it comes to a practical application, particularly in our Western world, perhaps not so, right? Is that what has motivated you to find your own way away from this traditional form of sannyas? Or is it not a way? How would you describe your personal quest, though coming from that tradition, and how do you foresee you culturing yourself, living yourself with these ideas in today's modern world on your own?
Right. That's a great question. There's lots of elements in there. First of all, I was born into a fundamentalist Christian tradition, the Church of Christ, growing up. And they are the fundamentalists of the fundamentalists. They're not even sure that everybody on the front row of the church is going to make it. And they constantly remind you of that. And so that I found that growing up in that tradition extremely stressful, because you were never sure that you had made it across the line, that you were ever safe or not. That was deeply rooted in my family tradition. I mean, the first generation, the firstborn son, going all the way back to 1749 in Pine Knot, Arkansas, has been a minister. And so a very deep family tradition. And I also went to seminary, also became a minister in that tradition, but never got my own congregation because I went beyond the tradition. We had a very unpleasant parting in my college years where I just realized, no, this particular set of ideals is too small for my life. I don't fit there. And I kind of stretched out from there and just began looking at the world, and the idea of forming my own religion became my goal. I was like, I don't want someone else's box. I don't want someone else's ideas. This is my beloved. This is my life. This is my investigation to make and to build. And so I started just becoming curious, I guess, about philosophies, about religious ideas. And I decided that I would just pick those things that I found helpful to myself. And I got into rather a weird period, for sure, where if you'd come to my house, you would have just been somewhat hesitant probably to walk in the front door. I had no furniture because I just liked pure potential. I didn't like stuff. And so I didn't fill my house with furniture. I had a kitchen table, I had a bed and a dresser. And then different things would find their way into the house, but I loved that potential. I had a big, giant kind of, almost a throne that it was an artist friend of mine had made it out of beech driftwood that he had found. So I had this wonderful big stone, and I had a little box that tea had been shipped from China in that I had picked up. And that was my kind of shrine in front of my chair. So I had an empty room with this big, crazy chair in it, a nice little tea box. And on that tea box table, I had made a set of runes. I had gotten into that idea of, those earth traditions, and started kind of following those because that was something very immediate to me at that point in my life. So I studied the Druids until I found out that we really don't know anything about them, that the Catholics were very effective in completely wiping them out. So we don't even know their teachings or their traditions. And most of the stuff around that movement these days is pretty much made up. So I kind of stopped that investigation after coming to that. But I made a set of runes. I went and found a tree, an oak tree that had been struck by lightning. I cut off a branch. I made the runes, burned the little symbols on them. And I would read those. Part of my journey, I went to the Czech Republic to live for a while, moved in with this gypsy family, literally a gypsy family. And in the mornings, the mother would read the tarot for all of her family members to set them up for their day. And I would be there with her, and they would all go off to work, and it would just be she and I. And so one morning she said to me, she says, "I want to see if you have the gift. Can I test you?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And so she gave me a little test, showed me some cards and asked me to tell what came up for me in that and whatnot. Anyway, so we went through a series, and she determined that whatever it meant, I had the gift, and so she taught me how to read the tarot. So tarot became a part of of my meditation. Actually, that's how I would do my meditation. I would read my own tarot and consider it the company of the divine. That's how I thought the mother would talk to me. And so I used the tarot, and I used my runes, and I used to take the smudge stick, that sage stick, and I used to purify the room in all the four corners before I would sit down to do my meditation. Now, my meditation was also rather unusual in that I considered it to be a date with the divine, and it was romantic, and the meditation was romantic, and and so kind of followed that for a while, and so that's kind of how it grew out of. I was invited by a partner of mine in 1999 to go to India. And I thought, oh, what a marvelous trip that would be for an investigation, for finding out some of these things. And sure enough, there was a teacher waiting for me there that I didn't know of, and had a very beautiful experience with her, a very divine experience with her that was inexplicable, and that I could not fit into an explanation. I could not find any place to put that in my mind. And so I decided to build my life around it. I thought this was a good demonstration to me that there is a spiritual reality beyond the physical experience of life. And I took her on as a teacher. And that ultimately led to me becoming a monk, because I thought it was quite shocking to me that there was an organization in the world. This is how naive I was, really. How shocking it was that there was somebody that was willing to house me, clothe me, and feed me while I did nothing but my spiritual investigation. I thought, wow, what a boon. what an amazing thing that exists. And that I had lived 35 years of my life without even knowing that such things existed, because in my traditions, there was no monasticism. I didn't know what a monk was beyond their idea of telling me enough about it to show me that it was absolutely wrong and I'd go to hell if I ever became one. So that's what I grew out of. That was the nurturing thing, and just seeing how small it was and how damaging it was for me to be in that environment. I've just opened up to go beyond it and to find out what are the principles, not the rules. I'm not interested in the rules of living. I'm interested in the principles of freedom. I'm interested in knowing just what Vivekananda says. How do you live this life and enjoy it without getting caught in it, without getting tangled? And so that's the ongoing investigation. Was there a question that I was answering?
The question was that, when you tell me this story, and this is interesting, where you came from an extreme conservative environment and then went all out in the experimentation, set yourself free, and then finding a philosophy, which was the Vedantic philosophy, which is very freeing. I mean, it's hard to understand for anybody coming from a Christian background how free and liberating the Vedantic philosophy really is, and that it's interested in not beliefs, but in a quest for freedom. But ironically, you and I both then got involved into a monastic organization that then, in my humble opinion, is very necessary at some point in life to discipline, to learn, to culture yourself, because you yourself said you have to be careful going out in the oneness of existence and then not having cultured yourself enough to handle that freedom. But then at the same time, we also got caught a little bit in it, right? After a while, it becomes an organization and there's a hierarchy. And so you set out now once again, in your own quest towards freedom. And my question really is, when you take all of this that you have gone through, the experiment of your background, the experiments, even with the Druids, with your Indian guru, that lady, and then the Vedantic tradition, the monastic experience you have gathered, and then you say beautifully so that whole life, the whole of nature, all of this is spirituality, and I'm part of that. So how do you take all of this now into an integrated whole? I mean, everything you have done that led you to now, how do you see now? How would you want to live spiritual life now based on everything you have done? Because you are a monk still in the tradition in some way or other. How do you see that going forward in terms of your quest?
Yes, that's also interesting, because that also is evolving and changing. I'm moving into a part of life now where I live on a point and not on a line. So I don't see things as a continuation. I don't see my life being the result of a cause and an effect. And so my practice has changed quite a bit. I don't see anything that needs to be done in myself at this point, not because I've achieved anything, except maybe that understanding. But uh, so I really think that it's the enemy of religion to think that you join that religion or become religious in order to get something, whether that's enlightenment, whether that's heaven, whether that's a good life, whatever it is. If you're practicing for something, your religion is not going to feed you. It might become a part of your ego structure and give you your place in the world and your set of boundaries that you can define yourself by, but it's not going to set the fire of freedom in the heart. It's not going to do that, because that already already exists. And if you don't see it there and you don't know it there, religion's not going to build it for you. And so anything that you do to get is just a practice in hunger. So my practice has become about enjoying the moment as it is. That when I meditate, it really is, first of all, acknowledging the oneness and that love is at the source and center of all of this, and that this divine wisdom is a part of our nature, that Satchitananda, that love, pure wisdom, and pure being is our nature. That is, for the Christians, that is the image of God that has been placed within us, and the expression of that divine principle of God. Well, I believe that God is a divine, just the divine principle. He's unmoving, unchanging. So that divine principle has been placed here, and it will emanate, it will express, it will manifest. And this I that wants to take control and direct it is to be minimized. And really, I am now in the practice of using everything about myself, all my senses, using my mind, using my body, using everything as a listening device, right? My practice is to become constantly aware of this divine beloved, which is encapsulating my experience. Of course, ultimately, I think I'm the one encapsulating everything, but at this point, as a self, as an ego self, as a personality, I just believe, well, one expression of it would be that light and love are synonyms. They are the same thing, right? Because
When you talk about Christian, Vedic Christianity, how in
yes,
this context would you define that? And yeah.
yeah. So Vedic Christianity, basically, I chose the name because I'm a little bit of iconoclastic. I wanted people to become curious, like, what in the world? And I thought the Christians would go crazy. I thought they would just attack me left and right. I've not yet. Well, I have had 2 or 3 people get in a little bit of their Baptist summary of how wrong I am, but it wasn't the Christians. It was actually the Hindus that attacked me the hardest, which was quite shocking to me, because it was their openness that inspired the idea to me. So I thought that was an interesting irony. But Vedic Christianity is taking this knowledge that religion is one, and so using all of the tools that have been given to us and presented to us, instead of boundarying Christianity and only using Christianity to decipher Christianity, which is why I think it consistently just keeps being too narrow to be effective, to take the Vedas and say, for instance, I heard from Sri in a book, I Am That by Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, that the world is newly created in every moment, and that each of all the worlds, the universe that's created in each moment, they have nothing to do with each other. There is no linear connection between this universe and the new one that I'm in now. and that my mind takes a snapshot of these universes, compares them together, and creates the story that relates them, that makes them a continuity. And I found that a fascinating idea, because you can see it in a movie. You know, in a movie, when you're watching a movie, you sit on the edge of the previous frame and you look at the new frame, and your mind takes those two snapshots and creates the story. And that's actually what the movie is, because that's where the movement comes from. There's no movement in a movie. You know, a movie is just a series of stills, and yet your mind, by creating the story of linearity, creates an entire world out of colors and noise on the screen. And so I wanted to, so I was taking that truth. This is where the idea of Vedic Christianity actually started for me, actually. I thought, okay, well, what if that's true, if creation is new in every moment, perhaps the story of the Garden of Eden in the Christian Bible is a looping story. And maybe it's not a story about the material world and its beginning, since this world is not material, it's of a spiritual nature. Perhaps that story is a looping story that we are experiencing at every moment in our own creation. And maybe the fall of Adam and Eve, maybe that's a discussion or a metaphor or a description of the process. And so I began to study the process of the fall of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden as the looping story that's going on at this very moment.
You could
And
say
if you
that
look at the
it is our entanglement at that moment to see duality versus the singularity behind all things.
Right. Well, the singularity was there in the garden when there was no when there was no there was one divine will.
Right.
Love was the pure motivation, and that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That tree was the tree. The fruit of that tree was egoism. You know, if you eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil comes when there's two wills. You know, when you break away from your divine nature and start, what she does is she does a three-step process. She looks at that fruit and she sees that it's beautiful. All right, that would have been no problem. Of course, it's beautiful. It's divine, right? But she made the mistake of going to level 2. She says it looked like it would be good for food. She wanted to grab. She wanted to take. And the third thing, she thought that it would give her wisdom and make her like God, which we know from the creation story already. She was like God, and she was in perfect unity with God. She was walking in the garden with God. And yet, because of the beguilement of that serpent, she got confused. She forgot her nature.
Well,
and so she reached out.
When you talk about this idea of Vedanta, right? It is that when the ego arises, creating a separation, thereby creating desires, thereby creating us completely disconnecting from the garden, from the oneness of existence. And so, are you saying that by
it's all there?
Yes, it's all there, right? So the whole idea is to go back to the oneness.
Well, we have to conquer desire, because the way that I'll summarize it rather quickly. So what she does, she steps into her senses, looks at the sensory world. She gets tantalized by the beauty of something, thinks there is something there that will make her whole, that will complete her, and she reaches out to get it. And that is our looping delusion, right? That there's something out there that's going to make us whole.
Yeah,
and that's
brilliant.
That's what egoism does to us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what egoism does to us. And the curse of the garden, the curse that God, quote, gives to her, is not a curse in the sense that he's cursing them for making that decision. It is simply the results of that decision. He says, now that you've made that decision, you know that you're naked. You feel small and you feel naked and you feel vulnerable because you've chosen to be small, vulnerable, and naked. You're identifying now with your senses and going through your senses for your identity and for your fulfillment. And he says, so you're going to go and scratch the dust of the earth for the days of your life to fulfill these desires.
That's an
and you look at our life
cycle of birth and rebirth until we
absolutely
rewind, unpeel all of this and redissect our sense of ego, our sense of separateness. And that is what Vedanta also is about, right? It is the shedding of the upadis, the limiting adjuncts, all those
Right.
things that make up this ego consciousness, to re-offer that back to the divine, as you call it,
Exactly.
the divine mother, until nothing remains, until only oneness remains. And so it's not about, I liked what you said, my life is a point, not a line or a destination. You have, at that point, you come to stillness, you come to just being here and now, and there's nothing to pursue, there's nothing to attain, there is nowhere to go, but to let go of all that what creates duality.
Yes. No, it's exactly it. Because that's the whole point. They get expelled from the garden
Right.
because they think themselves separate. And God puts a cherubim at the gate with a burning, flaming sword. And that flaming sword is desire. And so until you conquer your desire, you
Yeah.
can't get into the garden, back into the garden. And why did God not want you to get back in the garden? Because there were two trees in the garden. One is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the other tree was the tree of immortality. There were those two trees in the garden. And God has placed a requirement. You have to defeat your desire before you can re-enter the garden to know your immortality,
Right.
to know your infinity.
Because you will
And
always be subject to duality. If you pursue desires, you will never come to that oneness, to that stillness, and you will never understand that behind all of this, there is just one. You have to become quiet. You have to stop pursuing.
that's it. That's exactly it. And so that's Vedic Christianity. Exactly
Beautiful.
this
I love it.
conversation that
Absolutely.
we're doing right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a message that is powerful. And I can totally understand that a lot of Christians, rather than opposing that, would be delighted by that, because this is what the modern world is looking for. I mean, there are so many
Absolutely.
enlightened Christians. And as a matter of fact, even those that are conditioned, they know the misery of their own conditioning by their, so they're also open to receiving new knowledge. I mean, and that's why it's important, right, to work in your own culture. And that's you stepping out on your own is a brave thing, but also is a great necessity to reach out through your culture and bringing that Vedic knowledge through your own culture to people here.
Well, yeah, and it grew out of me not wanting to throw away my whole life all the way up until 1999. You know, I've been seeking truth or been interested in truth for my whole life.
Right.
And one of the reasons that I was very excited about the Vedanta is it didn't require me to throw anything out, or to get rid of everything else in my head except for this tradition and its stricture of ways. And so this whole practice began probably about a decade ago when I decided to pick up the Bible again for the first time in many, many years and to read it. And I wanted to see, there's this one experience with Ramakrishna where he says that people from all different traditions came to him for teaching and that they all thought he belonged to their own tradition.
Yeah.
And I read that and I thought, that's fascinating. That means he was versed in their traditions, first of all, that he could talk to them through their own mythologies, their own traditions, their own backgrounds, to the extent that they thought he belonged to them, that he was of that same tradition. And that arose in me in a different experiment that I underwent probably about a decade ago. The time for me is very fluid. I don't know exactly how long ago it was, but somewhere around 10 years ago, where I thought to myself, can I teach the Vedanta using only Christian scripture? Because certainly if a Christian came to me for the teaching, like they would come to Ramakrishna for teaching or for instruction, could I, through their own tradition, teach the beauty of what I have found in the Vedanta that has only expanded my love of Jesus, expanded my love of the beloved, expanded my experience and my faith to know these things are true. Could I in fact, from any point in any tradition, can you teach the rest of them? And so I ended up moving into a Benedictine monastery in upstate New York for a year, about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, somewhere in there. I went up there and spent a year living with these Benedictine monastics, share with them the roots of what I was thinking in a Vedic Christianity, and to teach them some of the things, go through some of the scriptures that I was experimenting with interpreting them through the Vedas, to make sure that I wasn't violating any of their internal boundaries, to make sure that I wasn't being blasphemous or clearly misinterpreting something or doing text torturing, to come up with my ideas. So I spent a year with them studying and sharing. Occasionally I would throw a little class to kind of share ideas and get their reactions. And they were crazy for it. They loved it. They loved it. And I thought about staying there and working from that space. But I ran into the edges of the church there. It's like there's always this mother church thing that's always watching you, not while you're in your cell, not while you're within the cloister itself, but anytime you turn around and say something out loud, the church is there. And I ran into that because I asked a very unpopular question about baptism at one of my novice classes, because I was going through the novice classes with them to learn their tradition from the ground up. And I got yelled at. I got attacked, literally attacked verbally, for daring to question. Literally, the word Mother Church was thrown in there. And I knew at that point, I was like, see, that's what I can't endure. You can ask me a question. You can ask me where my question comes from. We can have a wonderful conversation about all of that. But you can't yell at me and attack me for asking a question.
Well, that's why your quest, which is so beautiful to unify in your own mind and also share that with others, the best of the world's spiritual knowledge, right? You're taking the best from the Vedantic culture, you're taking the best from our own Western roots, and you're synthesizing that in your own way. And for that, you have to be independent, right? Because everybody wants your alliance. Everybody is in that ego consciousness, in that identification, whether they're Hindus or Christians or whoever they are. The moment you say, I am, my own thought, I allow myself freedom to synthesize, then the only safe space is independence.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's true. Yeah, it's true. From the other angle, coming out of the Ramakrishna mission, I found the truths there were very permissive. The culture, the philosophy was, oh my God, infinite, just wide open, wonderful philosophy, so clean. That's the thing about the Vedanta. I always, one of the reasons that I really jumped into it, despite all of my defensiveness about religion, one of the main reasons that I was so open to just diving into the Vedanta was, one, because I wasn't required to leave anything behind. I could take it all and use it and synthesize it into my ideal. But the limitation from that side became cultural. They've had that religion for thousands of years. And even though I feel like, this is my own perspective, that Ramakrishna was a bomb of newness. He was not about Hinduism as it exists within the culture today. He had a vista, I think, that we're speaking to.
Well, it's not the fault of Ramakrishna or even the philosophy of the Ramakrishna mission, because that, as we both know, when that is the most liberal and expansive, thought culture you could ever find. But the problem is it gets encapsulated in a culture that tries to restrain,
to put it into the terms that it's comfortable with.
Right,
express it in the way that it's always expressed it as.
And that is the human condition. You cannot avoid that. And that's why, I was saying there comes a point that even there, you're going to have to find a way to live that in your own way. And that is.
Yeah, and the fact that I feel the need to escape also means that I have my own restrictions inside, things that I have to obey. But I really think that was Vivekananda's ideal. Religion as an institution is kind of a new world thing. It really wasn't that way really until the last 1,000 years. Religion was and still is in India in particular a very individual experience between you, your guru, and God, and
Right.
you work it out. And Christianity, the Western world, has actually now made the institution bigger than the ideal. When I was invited to Cambridge University, I don't know, probably 5-6 years ago, somewhere in there, to have a conversation, an open table conversation with like 10 other people. The question was, can a person be an upstanding citizen of both the Hindu community and the Christian community simultaneously? And so we went to this little forum there. I had to write a little paper, which that was the first time I formalized Vedic Christianity into a writing. And we had a conversation about that and about these limitations. And one of the points that I had made was that he who was Jesus and he who was Buddha and he who was Rama and he who was Krishna is the same. It's the same person. It's God incarnating, and that an incarnation is not an addition to God. It's not God taking on a set of attributes. It's God presenting in our form with no ego. So like Ramakrishna describes an avatar as being a hole through which God can be seen. And so when I was presenting that, there were two theologians there from the Catholic Church, and they were very curious about that idea. I thought it was a throwaway. I thought that was kind of just an obvious thing, but they kind of glommed onto it, and we talked for over an hour about it, and because they were very curious because they were not able to refute it. They couldn't find a scripture that made that untrue. And so they said, well, we want to talk more, but we're going to do some research. Let's meet again tomorrow. Can you meet again tomorrow? And I was like, yes. So I went back the next day, and the only thing they had found was that in 1967, there had been some sort of big meeting in the Catholic Church to clarify some things. And in that meeting, it was determined that truth did in fact exist within other religions, but that the power of salvation was held by the church. Yeah. And so, I said 1967, that's a little fresh to be true for me. So I kind of just decided I wasn't going to buy into that thing, but I was quite shocked, even from the Christian perspective, that the church has moved the power of salvation out of the Christ and into the institution, which they don't see a difference in. They see the institution as being the body of Christ, and that Christ is the head. The Pope is that direct relationship. But I thought to myself, I just thought, wow, no, institutions cannot take that place. Institutions cannot, because they are not living, and they do not have a soul, and they are not connected to the divine, regardless of your hierarchy. And so I kind of rejected
the whole idea of Vedanta is that, truth is beyond the pairs of opposites, right? So the moment you're in manifestation, the moment you're in duality, you're really still subject to an interpretation, to energy appearing as an object or a subject. And so you're never at the truth to begin with. So, Vedanta counters, by definition, any of these statements, because and that's why it becomes an experience, a personal experience. Spirituality is a personal experience where you transcend your own mind, your own duality, and you become one with the beloved. You become one with God. And that can never be an institutional experience. That is an individual experience.
Yes, and right. Yeah, even internal individual,
yes,
an unshareable experience. Yeah,
right, and that our spiritual culture, they're there to help us attain to that. right? I mean, otherwise
Yeah.
there is no point to any of that, because it just restricts you and keeps you in duality, and it conforms you, and it keeps you into some sort of pattern of enslavement that is anything but freedom.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, religion is only scaffolding. That's it.
Right. That's it. That's it. That's a good
It's
point.
meant to come to the completion, come to the understanding of the unity of all things. After
Well,
that, take it down, throw it away.
beautiful.
It's
Well, I love your whole concept of Vedic Christianity, and I loved your whole interpretation of the garden. You know and that's an eye opener. It's beautiful the way you work with Christianity and Vedic understanding, and I'm so happy for this interview. Thank you so much. And who knows, we'll meet again. You're always ready to come and visit our place, and have a little
yeah.
retreat here if ever you need, but it seems you're very peaceful where you are. But if you ever happen to be in the area, please come by and stay. You're welcome, and we would love to pick up that conversation at that time.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I do have an intention of coming out there. Who knows when those things happen, but it will happen, I believe.
Yes, let's keep an open agenda. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I will book your web if your YouTube channel and your contact information, everything below this video, so people can hook into your work and your classes, whatever information you want to share. If you can send that to me, and I will put it under the video. And we're recording. This video is not over.
I thought you were done.
No, we're not done. I'm ending the video.
You're just talking to him.
Yes, I'm ending the video.
Say hi.
So no. Anyhow, now our official ending has been ruined. Thank you so much.
Oh, it sounded like you finished.
No, we're still recording as we speak. So anyhow, thank you so much. So anyhow, thank you so much, brother, and we'll be in touch, yeah?
Definitely.
Let me stop the video here.